Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pixilated Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Rife. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Glad to have you here. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. We're here sitting in season 3. We're a few episodes in at this point. I guess this is probably episode 10 or 11. And if you've been listening, you know that we have been jumping back and forth between interview type podcast episodes and then also like content type podcast episodes. Today, we're back for another interview style podcast episode. So that being said, our whole mission statement when we're producing interviews is to find people inside of in the events industry, but also industries that sit adjacent to it, marketing and operations and that whole side of it. And we look to find people that sit in kind of the nooks and crannies of all those worlds. So like any industry, there's a dynamic amount of positions that are there. And I feel like a lot of times in the events world, we don't get to hear about the people that are sitting inside of those specific roles. So whenever I'm looking for guests for our interview series, it's with that in mind. I love to find people that we haven't talked to yet, so that way we, and by we I really mean selfishly me, I have a chance to ask the questions that I'm interested in. So today is going to be no different. On the podcast today, I actually have a bio. I'm going to do a little intro before we welcome her on. We have Becca Mazur. So Becca is an accomplished events leader with over 15 years of experience on both the agency and client sides. The pandemic's impact on the events industry allowed her to realize her passion for strategy, leveraging event tech. She has since become a visionary in event strategy and operations, integrating cutting-edge tech stacks and optimizing processes to capture meaningful event data and insights. Based in Long Island, New York, Becca brings people, processes, and technology together to create impactful event experiences that drive business growth. Becca, welcome to the Pixilated Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
That's quite the intro there.
Thank you.
I love it. You have to always like put those things out there, and then you're just like, sometimes it's like a gut check, like as you're writing it, And I say that as somebody whose title has visionary in it. So like, with all of the flushed cheeks, I poke fun in a good-natured way. But needless to say, thanks for being here today. We're really excited to get a chance to speak with you. Like we talked a little bit before, event technology and how it could have global impact for organizations is something that's been an interest of mine for near a decade. So seeing where your experience base is was super exciting, and I have a ton of questions. I'm really looking forward to digging in. But before we get there, let everybody know that's listening. Give them, like obviously I gave them a primer just there, so you don't have to reread that. But just let everybody know who you are and how you got here today.
Sure. So I'm Becca Mazur, actually, just like. Yeah. So I actually started out working I was planning events on the side and I loved it. I just didn't know that it was an actual career. It didn't take me long in entertainment to kind of be disillusioned by that industry as a whole and to realize that events was an actual industry. So I made a pivot over to the world of events and pursue a career. I started out on the agency side. I was there for about 8 or 9 years. Then I went client side, which really helped me round out my experience, gave me a deeper understanding of the event life cycle as a whole. Fast forward to 2020, as you mentioned in my bio, 3 weeks away from my most favorite event, and I'm fortunate enough to have an opportunity to take on an event strategy role while we're all figuring out the new normal, which I'm sure you remember. It was kind of kismet for me. I always had an operational mindset, going back to my very first role. I kind of drew a path and realized that I was always trying to help make things better, make processes better, look for the right tools. And now I had the chance to marry, that operational mindset with strategy, which is something that I didn't think was even something that I could do. So I kind of like to use the cogs in a wheel analogy. So events used to happen in silos and data was thrown, on a table. But when you align those cogs into an engine in the right way, it powers the event lifecycle. So back to my event strategy role, I realized I could help build that aligned engine by creating strong data foundations, optimized for integration, optimized for automation, just make everybody's lives easier. As we all know, there has been a lot of manual effort in the world of events and event planning and execution and end to end. So just really seeing how event technology and data could make lives easier and to open the door to a 360-degree view of how impactful an event is to an overall marketing program. So in-person events are obviously back now, better than ever, more data than ever. So my kind of mission now is to help people make sure they're building the right foundation so they can finally leverage all of that data. So they can then measure success, measure overall business impact in a real way. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Excited to dig into anything you're interested in learning more about.
Yeah. For one, like points for Kismet. No one has used that word in an interview
I
with
love
me
that
yet,
word.
so love that. So immediately I'm tasked with a bunch of different directions that I want to go in, and I'm super interested in this idea of laying the foundational groundwork to be able to meaningfully do this thing, because I think that one of the experiences that we've had in so many years is having a tool like a photo booth, right? Having a tool that can capture experiential data, and it's built to be able to capture that at scale and move it somewhere at scale. But it doesn't mean that the receiving ends are set up to receive that, much less do something in a meaningful capacity with it. But before we get to so let's earmark that. But before we get to that, what I would love, and I'm happy to share with you my kind of aha moment as well, but what I would love is to hear a little bit about, is there an aha or more than one aha moments where you found yourself with that information in front of you and you realized this is is a problem, right? Is it an opportunity? Whatever, however you want to frame it up. Was there a moment for you where you were like, wait a second, this just, it doesn't make sense to me?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because an event technology type of role at a company is something that's a little bit newer. So I kind of took the event strategy role in that direction. I noticed that where you sit within an organization really makes an impact. And when I moved over from sitting on an events team over to more of a marketing operations team and MarTech team, it really gave me a new insight into how impactful the event tech was and the data was, and how disconnected things really were. Because when you're sitting and you're seeing different perspectives and collaborating with different people, you don't always see it from different perspectives. So it gave me the opportunity to kind of see, oh wow, everybody's doing this and seemingly doing it successfully, but everybody has their own ways that they're measuring that success. We were putting a lot of effort into measuring digital marketing, and there was so much data coming out of that kind of helped drive strategy. And, I took a step back and I said, why is no one using the data from events to do the same thing? It used to be pre-pandemic, the drivers were how many people registered and how many people came. Now, after the kind of the explosion of the event industry during and after the pandemic, with the introduction of virtual events and all the data and engagement opportunities you had within those, and it just opened up a whole new world of data. And how are we using that data? To your point, if you're capturing these things, that's great. But if it's living in the tool that you're capturing it in, then what? So it was really important to me to kind of take a full assessment of the process from end to end. And it's not just about the data, it's about how healthy the data is, how complete the data is. And my mind just started looking at it in a much more big picture way. And I realized there was a huge opportunity to really rebuild that foundation, to make sure that everything was aligned, to make sure that all events were captured, to make sure that the data strategy going into every single event was something that was top of mind as a part of the planning process. It's really just important, not just even capturing the data, but to your point, what happens to that data after the fact, and making sure that, the event's over, you don't just move on to the next event.
Right. Or put it in your junk, drawer,
Exactly.
My experience is being, more on the, being on the deployment side, we were working with a big brand at Bonnaroo was one of the big aha moments. And so for anyone that doesn't know, Bonnaroo is a huge 4-day festival that happens on a farm in Tennessee in June. It's like 115 degrees. It's brutal. And we were in this posh air-conditioned tent, and we were doing green screen photos, and we were cranking. We were just crushing. And, they were awesome, psychedelic, bright, fun, totally of the moment. And this was a athletic kind of consumer brand that we were working with. And we're taking all these photos, and people are emailing them to themselves. We're not printing. It's just all digital. People are emailing them to themselves. And then there is a charging station for phones that has some kind of data capture. And then there's a massage area with a person with a clipboard writing down email addresses. And then out front, there's a spin the wheel, and you had to fill out an index card with your info.
Oh God.
But it was getting all smeared, right? Because it was outside of the air conditioning. And I remember standing there with the guy who was the big boss for the whole massive activation, and being like, Max, who takes the cards from the spinner wheel and the checklist and this and consolidates them all and puts them together, and then and by the way, tomorrow morning, is everybody that was here today getting an email that says yesterday was rad, today's going to be better, drop by and power up or refresh or do whatever it is. And he was just dumbfounded. And this is a massive company, and it's no slack on him. He was at that point in time, it's 8 years ago, already kind of probably moving towards the north side of his seniority in that role, right? And everything was changing rapidly. So I remember that was this moment where I would just realize whoa, there is no centralized person to connect this. And then even more so, even if there was, there's not a meaningful way for them to turn around and use this data in the short term and in the long term. And
Exactly.
that's what led to us building our thing, because we were doing, we would go around with Under Armour, right? And we would be part of their finish line thing at every marathon that they're a big sponsor of. And or a high school volleyball tournament, the nationals or something like that. And, for us, we always just saw wait, this is a teenage, female basketball player, right? We know where she's come from. We probably have some idea what products would align with her buying. We know what's important, all of these touch points that we could blend into our communications, right? To really create that genuine experience of why we're in each other's worlds. And that was a big, it was inspiring to us. Now, whether we've accomplished it or not has everything to do with the previous question, which is that so many organizations they are not set up to receive it in a meaningful way, and they're not set up to do anything with it if they were able to receive it.
Completely. And yeah, it's so funny. I remember just dating back to my agency days, having opportunities that were oh, you can't get this photo unless you enter your email. And I was well, for what? And then that's the whole thing. It's well, am I going to get a million emails after this? Do they even know who I am and what I'm interested in? But what I did realize, which I'm sure you had your aha moment too, is something like a photo booth. You're not going to get a spam email because people want their photos. So it's almost
the conversion rates are crazy.
Exactly.
The conversion rates are crazy because if you don't want it, you just hit the X. You don't send it. You don't send it to a fake email address. So the deliverability rate is like 99.8, and then the open rate is like 98.8, which is amazing because when you think about it, like those emails and text messages, they have copy in them, right? So it's more dynamic than people realize, and I think that that's a
Yeah.
big challenge here. Is like you've got the experience that happens when they're there, and if they never get the photo, that had an impact, and you can't measure it like in the same way, but like you can if you can look at the photo, you can see that they're stoked. Like if they took a photo in your tent with your brand and they're smiling, you won, right? Like base
Right.
level, and there's more that you can add on to it. But you're right, the conversion rates on those kind of digital experiences are really, really high because there's no requirement to do it, and if somebody doesn't want it, they're just going to say no thanks.
Exactly. And also everybody loves getting their picture taken. It's just especially at these festivals for sure.
It's critical,
Um,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's part of the entire milieu of why you went there. Like you want, fun
you want to
ways.
capture
Like
it.
you want to put it
Yeah,
on your stories. You want to put it. You want
exactly.
content for your reel when you craft it together at the end of that day. And those kind of experiences are, like those are the unique. Like everybody wants a picture in the Snapchat house at South by Southwest on like the ghost swing. Like I've got one. You know, like it's a no brainer. So. Um, okay, so love that. Let's. What is the? I'm trying to organize this so it makes sense in a linear conversational sense. Um, I'd love to kind of hear about. So you were working on this kind of stuff before COVID hit, and seemingly you were in an organization through a lot of that, right? But let's
Hmm.
talk about how that change happened inside of the same organization, right? Where you kind of went from an event lead, right, to being like an event technology lead, because all of a
Right.
sudden, right, like to be an event lead meant that every call you were on, you had to explain what an iframe was, or like what a Zoom call was, or like all those like little ticky tack details to your customers who, we've said this, we've hinted at the events industry maybe not being so progressive when it comes to adopting new things in the past. Um, so that being said, like talk about what it was like when it hit, right? Because all of a sudden it's something that you probably have seen and been advocating for, and now your bosses and your colleagues and everyone further up is they're forced to reckon with it, right? And now
Yeah.
all of a sudden, Becca's been talking about this thing and it's right here in our face, and there's no option but to embrace it.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, the event that I was working on was it was an event that couldn't be done virtually. I'll put it that way. It was really focused on peer-to-peer networking and one-on-one meetings, things that just, it wasn't possible, right? So we didn't really delve too much into the, shifting from, physical to virtual, but I stayed on top of all of the technology as though we were going to, because at any point you never knew when that was going to happen. Right. And it was just amazing to see how rapidly the industry just pivoted. And, and these tools that, you maybe had like a handful of tools to do webinars, right? Prior. And now it's a whole almost another industry in and of itself. I remember like dating back pre-pandemic, a virtual event, like a hybrid event. I'm using air quotes. I'm not sure if video is shown on this or not, but a hybrid event was, something that was happening live with a video camera set up in the back of the room, just streaming what was on stage, and that was it. The pandemic just opened the door for everybody to realize that you need to figure out how to engage the people that are at home watching virtually. So essentially how it helped me kind of grow out the event tech side of things is when we were kind of back in-person events. I took a look left and I saw that we were still doing webinars the same way. And I said, well, that's changed too. And I think, and a lot of people and a lot of organizations still kind of put webinars in that box and didn't really realize the opportunity they had to turn those webinars effectively into virtual events, because that's what they were,
Yeah.
So, I had the opportunity to really kind of revamp the webinar program to add more engagement, make sure we were using better tools, make sure we brought on a producer, because, it really isn't on, an event manager or a field manager to be, doing the quote unquote AV and running the board during a live webinar. No, you needed to treat these like they were actual events. So that is really, how I saw kind of virtual make its way into an organization that wasn't quite wanting to pivot to the virtual events during the pandemic. So, it still had an impact. And to this day, it does make a difference, right? Anyone who's just doing webinars for, talking head content, they're not going to get the traction that they once did. Like, yes, it's content that can be promoted, but it's much more engaging when it's live or Simulive. I was a big fan of Simulive, so I can talk about that for days. But it gives people a chance to feel like they're in the space with someone. They can engage with Q&A, polls, things like that. You have to figure out how to differentiate yourself in that space. And yeah, the old webinars are not going to cut it anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of what I expected and what I saw was the opportunity. And I think this is a lot of the reason why so many people were unsuccessful at it. One, because it was a big apple, right? Like, that was a lot to do. And there were so many prereqs to be able to do it well, right? Like, when we're talking about, so like, I'm gonna reference this LinkedIn post of yours. Event tech is MarTech, right?
Oh yeah.
Which I'm with you 100%. I think the problem is like, there are a lot of organizations with not great MarTech and comms. Like, that had already been moving so fast for 10 years that you have these organizations that maybe have some Luddite tendencies inside of them, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's this thing, we're trying to catch up, and then all of a sudden, like, they got a Voltron together, and all three of them are like at a 33% kind of like functionality, or they're not even really dialed into the organization in a real way, right? They're just kind of been like, oh yeah, we need to do this, let's like slap it on there, and we don't really know what that means because it's hard. But that being said, what I thought was the opportunity with virtual and with COVID and this whole forced hybridizing is really, how do companies become media platforms, and that becomes this very significant portal. And I think that the idea should have been, and what I thought was, you're really building a whole new audience in a sense, and that audience can actually be activated dynamically and separately from your live event audience, and you can activate them in tandem, and they really represent a whole new business segment that can be engaged with. But that's a tough idea to get together, and I think that if you didn't have media platform chops to make sure, whether that was spinning all the plates to get the attention and present the kind of big idea, all the way through to following it on in a meaningful way and having follow-up events and having follow-on education and program, like an example I would use would be like the American Heart Association's annual gala, right? That happens in Kansas City or something like that, that can no longer happen. Like, for them and the right marketing comms team, that presents a huge opportunity, because now all of a sudden you have people across the globe who have been impacted by heart cancer or heart disease or whatever the case may be, and they want to be advocates for it, but they're not in Kansas City. And typically it's been this localized organization that, even though it has a national impact, it still draws from like probably where its founders are and what have you. The opportunity there, right, was to all of a sudden have a global audience, and to then turn that global audience into a global community that you harness. And then you come out of this thing and you bring your live element back in, and maybe some of those new people that you've added in your digital ecosystem are regionally located and it works. But if they're not, it doesn't matter. Like, you just need to make sure that you program for both of them and you figure out how to continue going. And I think that was just such a lot for so many organizations to wrap their head around, that I feel like the large majority have come back out on the other side saying like, good riddance to that. Like, glad we didn't have
Yeah,
to.
let's go right back to what we were doing before.
Right.
Yeah,
So like, it's a
yeah,
great Gatsby theme for this year's gala, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. I think you're right. It really has changed the landscape. It changed just the way that we think about community, right? Because before, to your point, we were very localized in a lot of these events that we were doing. So it just expands the audience, it expands the reach. And depending what the goals of the event are, what the organization is, it has to be looked at as almost a whole, new channel in and of itself. You might still be doing that gala, to your point. You might want to do it hybrid and include a virtual audience in a few elements of it where they feel like they're engaging with the people that are there, or you have something that's entirely virtual in addition to the live event that you're doing, and you never realized that you had that audience before until something like this happened. So it's the companies and the organizations that are going to leverage this new opportunity to reach this audience and get all this data. I can't even stress that enough. When you're online, the engagements are clicks, duration. You can measure what they're interested, how interested they are. You put up different, if you're a B2B organization, white papers, links to, other videos that you've done, and you can kind of see where your audience is gravitating to. Those aren't things you can always do at a live event. So not only do you have this new channel, but you have all these new engagement opportunities in a way that you have their attention, right? It's not like they're just, clicking through, past an ad on LinkedIn. Well, that obviously has a lot of impact. The amount of impact that can be measured at an event where they logged in, you have their attention, and then they clicked something. Like, just the possibilities are endless for how you can, further segment that data, personalize experiences for them, and really get them into this community, build this community around them. And I think that's the community is another channel beyond all of this, that's really, I see taking off in a lot of organizations as well.
Yeah.
And the community goes beyond the product or the organization, and it's a way for like-minded people to come together and talk about things and bounce ideas off each other, post opportunities, ask questions, and just really find their people. I know personally I've experienced, getting into a lot of different communities recently, event related, and it's been great. It's been great to kind of feel your community outside of the organization you're in, or your past coworkers, or just who you're connected to on LinkedIn. This community, to your point, is a whole nother, I think that's what's going to blow up next, honestly, because you can't get more personal than that.
Yeah. I don't think you're wrong. So I feel like we've spent a lot of time kind of identifying, right, the symptoms, kind of the traditional, like attitudes and feelings towards a lot of this stuff, and kind of the evolution of how it's gone. But I want to spin kind of the conversation for a second, and let's talk about this from like a proactive perspective. Okay, so
Sure.
Let's start by identifying, some organization types, and like, what are table stakes, right? Like, what are the things, one, is there an organization that is too small, right? Is there an organization that is large enough to really be able to do this meaningfully? And then my other question is, like, what are the table stake low hanging fruit wins, right? That they can start thinking about immediately. And then I've got a follow on question that'll come after that. But let's start there. Let's kind of like just go through and workshop out, like how an organization approaches it and what they can stand to win at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think an organization could be too big or too small to leverage events the right way. If you're doing events, you should be doing them with purpose. And if you're doing them with purpose and you have goals, you should be able to measure those goals. And if you can't measure those goals, then you probably shouldn't be doing the events in the first place, because you have no way to prove that there was a reason for you to be there, and that was a success, and that you should be there again. So it could be the smallest company, it could be the biggest company, but there's a common thread, and that's proving proving impact, proving the fact that, you were there for a reason and that reason impacted something, whatever the goal, whatever the organization's goals are. So yeah, I think what it comes down to at the end of the day, it's not just the size of the organization, it's the alignment within the organization. I think where a lot of companies struggle is alignment between sales and marketing. That's the very first thing, to be honest. Events touch both, right? You go to a trade show, who's there? You might have your marketing people there, but you have your sales people there. Everybody needs to be on the same page as to what is the outcome of this event. And then after the fact, it's this, the hot leads, the MQLs, it's getting passed off to the salespeople. So, an events team, a marketing team can give those sales teams the best leads that there is. Like literally they had the conversations and they know that there's interest, and then nothing could happen with those leads. So alignment between sales and marketing and really having a process for that handoff is key. Obviously, a smaller organization is probably easier because there's less people involved. And the larger you get with an organization, there's a lot more cooks in the kitchen. But that is number one, is alignment, regardless of how big or small it is. And then obviously starts with sales and marketing alignment. And then of course, alignment within the marketing organization itself, making sure that things are happening in a consistent way, within the organization as a whole and not happening in silos, and that there's a strategy around that.
Okay.
And then you said low-hanging fruit wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe even like so I think like low-hanging fruit, because thinking about like, what are our steps to implementing anything, right? And then I think the other thing that would be a valuable counterpoint to that, that's probably already there, is like, what is that data? Like, what is that, the whatever, the index of that thing that we've done, and how does that help us?
Yeah. Low-hanging fruit, it's hard. Again, it depends what level of maturity the organization is at.
Yes.
To your point, if they don't even have like a MarTech stack, then they have a lot more work to do on just the foundational end of their marketing organization. But assuming that they do have at least the digital side of things relatively buttoned up, the lowest hanging fruit is going to be getting the data. I hate to, there's no other way to say it. Like, make sure if you're going to, I'll use a trade show as an example. You're giving, there's a spin wheel or whatever there is. There's a pen that you're giving away. Don't just scan leads to scan leads. The low-hanging fruit is using this as an opportunity to qualify those leads. And most of the trade shows that you'll go to will have a badge app that you can scan. There's, a bunch of independent companies as well, independent products as well, where you can scan and qualify leads. Do it. Don't just scan. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Make sure your salespeople are trained on filling those qualifiers in within a day of when they have those conversations. Because the biggest thing you can do is get everybody doing things the same way.
Yeah.
Because you can't do anything if the data is all over the place.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, it's garbage in, garbage out. So, the first thing you could do, and is it low-hanging fruit for like impact? I don't know, but low-hanging fruit in that it's easy to get the data if you just ask the right questions. Then yes, that's the low-hanging fruit.
It's funny that you say that. So I want to ask you about your opinion of kind of first party, second party data happening in the trade show booth, right? Because those badge scans don't have the value that somebody putting their own email address in to get their picture has. And I use that because it's right at the top of my head, and obviously it's what I do. But there's other things that you can do aside from a photo booth to capture direct data from someone, and you need to consider that for sure. Like, do you have an opinion about how not the efficacy, but the quality of first party leads being captured through like some kind of tertiary system or experience versus, like the badge scanners that you're getting?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like what the goals are. Because if brand awareness, for example, is a key goal, then having a system like that and just getting as many people to interact with it as possible, get their picture with the overlay that has the brand's logo on it, sharing it out to social and putting a hashtag that, you basically pre-bake into the sharing feature. Those things are going to be, what is going to have the impact. If it's a trade show and it's B2B and, brand awareness isn't a key goal, and the key goal is marketing qualified leads, for example, it's going to be having the conversations, right? So I think if there's an equal goal of brand awareness over here and MQLs over here, then yes, both of those, the quality conversations are as important as an activation that's just going to draw people in and get the brand's name out there. But in a lot of cases, for the bigger brands where there already is brand awareness, for example, and you're looking for something that's going to take buyers' conversations, right? It's going to be the engagement. It's going to be meeting subject matter experts. It's going to be talking to salespeople and really understanding what those challenges are that the leads are facing. That's the information that needs to be captured in order to qualify those leads as someone that is interested in your product or service. So yeah, again, it just depends on the goals. So hopefully that answers
it does.
That question.
You did great. Excellent job. So we're starting to run a little long here, but I want to, I have a few specific questions that I really want to make sure that I ask you. And
Sure.
Maybe they're not meant to feel like hot seat kind of questions, but they're going to end up being that way anyway. So whatever. But coming out of, I keep saying I love that we're like post-COVID where we don't have to acknowledge COVID in the conversation, but because of, I think, where the wave that you're teaching from and about is so, it gained prominence because of that. Like it ends up being a relevant thing. But really, biggest surprise post-COVID in the event space?
The biggest surprise is the realization of with their event data. I think that there was just there was at least like an assumption that organizations, if they're collecting the data, then they must be doing something with the data. They must be, it must mean something to them. And they must all be doing, because this was before I was on that side of it. And then, that was probably the biggest eye opener for me, is that that's not the case in a lot of organizations. So, my goal is to, again, help educate and help organizations understand it's not scary, all that filming, but it's starting with the foundation, right? It's building it. It might take a year to get the data that's going to tell you the story you need to read, but it's worth it, because from that point on, then it's real time all the time, and you can be making decisions not on impact of wins and stuff, but at least real time enough where you'll know if you should be going back to that event the following year, and not just because you did it before.
Totally. I remember we built a Salesforce integration for our photo booth software, and we were like, "This is going to be amazing." And we took it to one of our customers, and we're like, "Look at all this we're doing for you. Like, you guys, you use Salesforce, and like we built this thing." And they were like, "Oh, like that sounds so awesome," but like the CSVs of all those emails that you send us, like we just put them in something we call the junk drawer. And I was like, "Oh,
fabulous,
man!" And this is a Fortune 100 company, and they were just like totally, honest about it. And what we realized in doing that is, when you're working with companies that have had crazy accelerated growth, if Pixilated blew up tomorrow, there would be a whole lot of processes that are not done right. And, then all of a sudden you start hiring and you start putting people in these roles, and they inherit the things that are there, and they assume that those things were considered and that they're there for a reason aside from that's just what we were doing. And then you just keep rolling, and then you pick up momentum, and people don't want to rock the boat, or it's too late, or it's hard, or you don't know, you don't even know on the org chart who the decision makers would be to make that change in a meaningful way. And then the next thing you know, you're capturing tens of thousands of email addresses, and you literally stick them in a Dropbox folder, because you don't know what you would, you don't even know anyone on the Marcoms team to say, by the way,
What's
that
$250,000
that we spend every weekend to be at a different place? We've got all of this. Okay, so next question is what do you think the biggest missed opportunity is with event technology coming out of the COVID ecosystem? Because like we've said it a lot
It's
here,
hard to
like
say.
so much money got spent into that ecosystem, and what we came away. I mean, like we've seen a lot of the companies that have absorbed a lot of that cash not make it through.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm
it's
just
not
kind of
even a missed
curious.
opportunity. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's missed opportunity. I would say it's, um, how do I say this? Um, not the right expectations for where it was going. Because, I think everybody immediately saw the value during the pandemic because we were all stuck, right? We're like, oh, this is going to change everything. This is what we need. And it was only those that had kind of the foresight to think about what was going to happen after. And I think the missed opportunity is, I guess, the virtual platforms that didn't see beyond virtual and didn't see beyond the pandemic. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of those being acquired, by larger companies doing kind of more tech that hits the in-person audiences as well. But yeah, I think that's probably the missed opportunity. I think, in the future missed opportunities, everything around AI, I feel like AI is the new pandemic. I hate to say, it's like, we're all trying to figure out how that's going to impact. And oh my God, it's great.
Sure.
But like, how can we utilize it? How can we leverage it? How can we use it to make our technology that much better? A lot of platforms and a lot of event technologies are using, the low hanging fruit of, content generation. But, we could all go to ChatGPT or my Claude.ai is my new favorite. Any of these and do the same thing just in the chat tool. So it's really figuring out and the companies that figure it out and do something that's going to change the industry are the ones that are going to come out on top. But that's going to be AI is going to be the next, like, why didn't we think of that? Or why didn't, the Monday morning quarterback situation for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Becca, this has been a super great chat. I have learned so much, and I have no doubt that a lot of the things that you said have provoked a lot of thoughts in people that are hearing it, listening. So we're going to wrap up here in just a moment. But before we do that, why don't you let everyone out there that's listening know, how to get in touch, who a good organization that you'd like to work with might look or feel like, challenges they have, whatever you think. Please just let everyone know, like, how to get in touch and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn, I would say, is the best place to get in touch with me. Connect with me there, message me there. It's LinkedIn / and it's just Becca Mazur, one word, BECCA MAZUR. And then contact me if you want to talk event tech. If anything I've said just, lit a spark, gave you an aha moment. I just love networking. I love connecting. I just love talking to anyone who has something that's gonna, pique my curiosity, or I can help them figure out a challenge that they're facing. I'm all about that. And then also, obviously, if you're an organization that's struggling with any of the things that we're talking about and want just someone to bounce off ideas and, not have it feel so overwhelming, I'm happy to chat about that too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Becca, on behalf of all of our listeners, thank you for taking time out of your day to come on and chat with us and answer all my questions. And
Happy
I mean,
to.
just be such a light in general. This has been really, really
Oh,
fun.
thank you. Yeah, it was great. Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely. Okay, guys. So that brings us to the conclusion of another exceptional interview. I'm going to make sure in the show notes there'll be links to Becca's LinkedIn profile, probably that wonderful bio I read at the beginning as well, and some other stuff in there. So if you want to get in touch, just open up the show notes and click that, and that will take you to the place you need to be so that way you can follow along, connect with Becca. Two things before we go. First and foremost, if you aren't subscribed yet, whether you're watching this video on YouTube or LinkedIn, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast network, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. It makes sure that you get notified each time we publish a new episode. And secondly, if you enjoyed this interview and you have a moment, please leave us a quick 5-star review and just a few kind words. Adding some words in there helps the algorithm out, helps us find more people. The vision for this podcast is just to spread more information around kind of the events and marketing and technology world. We really love to do it, and we really love when more people find us and find the things that we're doing helpful. So that's it. Until next time, I'm Patrick Rife with Pixilated. Peace.